midway through 2023, Porsche released their updated and facelifted third generation Cayenne. A few months after that, I was invited out to Barcelona with Porsche to try out their e-hybrid lineup on road and on track. I got to try out the Cayenne S e-hybrid, the Cayenne Turbo e-hybrid, and the flagship Cayenne Turbo e-hybrid with GT package. And all of those were incredible, especially the Turbo with GT package out on track, which just doesn't make sense because that car weighs 2.5 tons. Since then, I've spent a substantial amount of time in Michelin UK's Cayenne e-hybrid. That is the entry model hybrid, which Porsche didn't have on the launch out in Barcelona. And I tell you what, I'm really impressed with that package. But in the back of my head, I was always wondering what the third generation facelifted Cayenne would feel like if you removed that 250 or 300 kilos of hybrid running gear, the batteries, the motors, etc., and replaced it with a V8. And also, this is the pick of the bunch because it started at just under 85 grand.
One eternity later.
Honestly, I've had such bad luck with weather and rain this year, but thankfully it stopped, so we will continue. You might have noticed I said this was priced at under £85,000, and I was correct in saying that. But fast forward 3 or 4 months, and its base price has gone up substantially. It now retails at £91,500, and this particular press car, although it's not massively optioned, as you could probably see, retails at just over £105,000. So that's a chunk of cash, even if you are getting a luxury SUV with a Porsche badge and a V8 under the bonnet. I've never loved or hated the styling on any generation Cayenne, but I think this updated third generation looks pretty good overall. This car isn't scattered with options, and we will talk about those once we jump inside. It has the smallest possible 20-inch wheels. It has a lovely chrome surround of the glass. We have chrome tailpipes. You wouldn't approach this thinking it had a V8 under the bonnet and could do 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. Unlike the pre-facelift Cayenne S or the current Cayenne S e-hybrid that both have V6s under the bonnet, this now has a V8. It's a familiar Volkswagen Group engine, very similar to the one that you'll find in Audi's RS6, or in fact the Cayenne GTS, which is the model that sits above this, albeit with a few minor tweaks. It's a 4-litre V8 twin turbo, producing 474 horsepower and 600 newton meters of torque. It runs through a familiar ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox, and all the power and torque is fed to the ground via Porsche's all-wheel drive system. They claim that this will do the 0 to 62 sprint in 5 seconds, and we are going to test that out shortly, although conditions aren't perfect, so it's going to be interesting. Before we talk about the interior, let's talk about this car's specific spec, because unlike the Boxster, Cayman or 911, where you can get away with not having too many options ticked, I think the Cayenne does suffer if you don't tick the right ones. And in my opinion, this press car has some of the right ones and is definitely missing 1 or 2 that I would consider if I was looking for one. This press car actually has about £13,000 worth of options. Some of those have gone up substantially in the last few months, along with the list price, as we talked about on the outside. And believe it or not, 13 grand in options alone is not a massive amount to pay for an average Cayenne. I think the Michelin UK Cayenne has about 25 grand's worth of options on it. And I remember only a few years ago, you could double the retail price of a base Cayenne if you added all of the options on the configurator. So you can go absolutely crazy. The first one to talk about is this Algarve blue paint. I really like it. I think it suits the subtle spec on this car. It's not shouty, but it is classy. When this car was spec'd and ordered 6 to 8 months ago, it was £900. Unfortunately, if you want Algarve blue on your Cayenne today, well, it's part of the Legends colours, meaning Porsche now charge you £2,732. So I can't see too many people speccing it on their Cayennes going forward. Although the Cayenne S comes standard on 20-inch alloys, this particular press car has optional 20-inch sport alloys, I think they call it, and they retail at 700 quid. There are actually 28 wheel options for your Cayenne on the configurator, which I think is a wonderful thing in a world where you can only option 2 different designs on cars like an M3. But it is a little bit overwhelming, and the majority of those wheel options are anywhere between £2,500 and £4,000. So really make sure you think about that carefully. It has a £1,400 off-road package, including a compass. Essentially, they have beefed up a lot of the underfloor protection. So unless you're thinking about taking your Cayenne properly off-roading and regularly, I wouldn't bother with that. It has a £950 electronic tow bar. It has the £1,760 air suspension, which is a must in the UK as far as I'm concerned. It has the £1,325 rear axle steering, surround view cameras with active parking, just over 1,100 quid, and Bose surround sound at £1,060. They're the main options that are worth talking about. The rest of them are smaller, insignificant ones, except for the first aid kit, which Porsche charge you £9 for. Yes, that's an option. You have to option in a first aid kit and pay £9. I think that is a little bit cheeky. Jumping in any modern Porsche cabin is always a nice thing, and this updated Cayenne is no different at all. I remember experiencing it for the first time when I was out in Barcelona and raving about the fit and finish, quality, and just how modern it all feels, yet retaining some original Cayenne features like these grab handles down here. I think they've done a fantastic job. The driving position is spot on, very adjustable and ergonomically brilliant. These base spec seats, although they look fairly ordinary, they're very comfortable and relatively supportive. Where this particular Cayenne lets itself down a little bit is areas like the top of the dashboard or inside the door cards here. We've got a sort of cheaper rubbery plastic. But saying that, this is an SUV. It's a bit more of a utilitarian vehicle, so it kind of gets away with that. And I know if you go for higher spec models or you spend more Porsche money on the interior of your Cayenne, then you can get rid of this and replace it with leather and probably Alcantara, etc, etc. So this is more of a sort of price point thing on this specific car. But otherwise, this is a wonderful interior in the front, and when you jump in the back, that rear bench is really adjustable. You can get up to 5 people in here, but obviously 4 large adults in absolute comfort, just like we did with the Michelin UK Cayenne when we went out to Le Mans. First things first, let's test out this car's claimed acceleration figures. Conditions outside are far from perfect, as you've just seen. It's quite slick out there, but we shouldn't have too many issues getting off the line. My Racebox Mini is now ready to go. I'm in Sport using the drive mode. That is the most aggressive mode in this particular car. I've got all the traction and stability aids switched off. I'm going to let the gearbox do the shifting, and we're hopefully going to get off the line really well. My biggest concern from testing this before I switch the cameras on is that the brakes might not hold it on the line. It creeps forward a little bit, and I can't seem to activate an actual launch control, but I can stall it on the brakes. Porsche say it will do the 0-62 sprint in 5 seconds flat. Left foot is really hard down on the brake. Right foot is on the accelerator. It's not creeping forward, so here we go. Oh, that is fast off the line, and there is 60 miles an hour. 4.43 seconds to 60, not 62, but that is really, really fast and definitely quicker than what Porsche claim, which is nothing new because they're always very, very conservative. start by saying this particular car is missing a fundamental option for the Cayenne S. I'm going to caveat that by saying I haven't tried one with this said fundamental option. And that option is the sports exhaust. The reason I say that is, unfortunately, in the week that I've had this car, I've very rarely heard that wonderful V8. I say wonderful V8 because I know that power plant very well. It's been in so many amazing cars, in Bentleys, Lamborghinis, Audis, and of course many Porsches, albeit with slightly different variations, but they all sound, on the whole, wonderful. I've recently driven Audi's updated SQ7, and that has more or less exactly the same outputs as this. In that car, it sounds amazing and what you'd expect. But in this, you can barely hear it. And okay, we're in normal, but when we put it up into sports, and if I hold this gear selector down, put it into manual, there we go, manual shift, put it down in second, foot on the floor. I mean, you can hear it, and you are aware that it is a V8, but there's just not enough sound in the cabin. And more disappointingly, when I did the flybys a few days ago, and I got home all excited to see the content and listen to this thunderous V8, well, I couldn't hear it. And I don't know if you agree after watching the intro, but you just can't hear that V8 snarl on the outside, which is peculiar because I know there's so many regulations and noise, sound limits, etc. that these manufacturers have to go by, and every few months that seems to be getting tougher and tougher. So brands like Porsche have to essentially turn the volume down and mute wonderful units like this one. But I just didn't think it was possible to have such a subdued V8, and that is a real disappointment. So I'm hoping if you tick the sports exhaust option, it sounds better. And I'm pretty sure that when Petrolped drove one of these up the Goodwood Hill in 2023, when it was brand new and just about to be released, essentially, it was a beautiful paint to sample green. I can't remember the specific name, the colour, the paint in that car, but I'm pretty sure that particular one had a sports exhaust because it sounded really, really good on idle and when it was under load. So make sure you do tick that sports exhaust option, because it can surely only improve what is an otherwise fairly ordinary soundtrack. Next thing to talk about is ride and handling. As we know, this press car is fitted with the all-important air suspension. That's massively adjustable. When you put it into sport, it sits lower. When you put it into off-road, it sits higher, etc. And as you know, this particular press car has the smallest possible wheel option, which is still quite big, 20-inch, but they have massive tyre sidewalls. So I was expecting this car to have an exceptional ride and maybe lose some of its handling agility compared to some of the press cars that I've driven on 22-inch wheels with very small sidewall tyres. With those, maybe you'd feel a bit more connected to the road, the turning, etc. would be a bit sweeter. So let's start with ride quality. I'll knock it back into normal, where you lose any kind of sound from that V8, and I can instantly feel the car sitting up a little bit higher and the suspension getting a little bit softer. The ride quality in this is good. It's not brilliant though. I wouldn't say it's as good as the current X5 on air suspension, and that's saying something because BMW have always had pretty stiff suspension across the range. And to say that the Cayenne with air suspension and the smallest wheel option, well, it's definitely not as comfortable as the X5, but it's not uncomfortable. And remember, I'm filming this in the UK, and our roads seem to be getting worse and worse by the day now, not by the month or by the year. Literally by the day, there seems to be more potholes everywhere. So the fact that it's comfortable on our roads means that it's going to be really, really comfortable pretty much anywhere else in the world. But unfortunately, when you turn this drive mode clockwise and into sport, this has only got 3 modes: off-road, normal and sport. When you put it into sport, the car sits a little bit lower. It definitely stiffens up a little bit, so there's less body roll and just more compression, so it definitely feels a bit sportier, a bit more like it's sort of up for the job when you get into the twisties. When you get into those twisties and you turn in for the first time, the whole car feels a little bit vague. And if I hadn't have driven lots of other current Cayennes, then maybe I would have thought that's just how they all feel. But I know that the e-hybrid lineup and all the ones that I've tried so far feel really good when you put them in the right mode and you throw them into a turn. Whereas this, it just wanders around a bit, doesn't have really any feel in the steering. And I know I'm in a 2.2 ton SUV with electronic steering, so I'm not expecting it to feel amazing, but it's not as good as the other Cayennes that I've tried and tested. And that's been a little bit confusing to me. I understand that we're once again on the 20-inch wheels, and I understand that we're on much bigger tyre sidewalls, but I just expected more. It's just a little bit vague, and especially when you consider, like we just talked about, ride quality is not amazing, so I thought, well, maybe the handling will be better. And I don't know if it's down to the actual tyre on this car, and I'm not going to badmouth these tyres because I don't like doing that. People are aware that I'm a Michelin brand ambassador, but I don't like slagging off other tyre brands, especially when I haven't tried an equivalent, let's say Michelin or Pirelli, on the 20-inch wheels. So it could be down to specific tyre, or it could be down to the fact that on 20s, this car and this package does struggle a bit for sort of stability and feel, but it has been a little bit underwhelming. The other variable that it could be and has crossed my mind is, although the e-hybrid variants that are 2.4 to 2.5 tons, I think the V6s are basically 2.4 tons, and the V8s, like the turbos, are 2.5-ish tons, although they're 200 to 300 kilos heavier than this car, the weight balance on those e-hybrids is almost definitely better, because you've got the batteries, etc., over the rear axle, and in the V6 you've got a smaller lump over the front axle, whereas in this setup, well, you've just got a bigger, heavier V8 over the front axle and nothing over the rear. I was going to say fuel tank, but you've got a fuel tank in the e-hybrid as well, so maybe it's a combination of all three: weight balance, smaller wheels, and maybe not the best tyre. But like I said, I'm not sure if it's any of those, but I would like to try a Cayenne S with a sports exhaust and with a slightly bigger wheel option, like a 21 or a 22. What I've discovered during my time with this car is that the brilliant Porsche engineers have somehow developed the e-hybrid variants to feel as good, if not better, than the much lighter combustion engine only variants like this Cayenne S. And as I've said a few times, there are quite a few variables involved, and I'd love to try, let's say, a Cayenne S e-hybrid and this Cayenne S combustion engine V8 back to back with exactly the same specs, because Porsches are so different, they're so configurable, so it's always very difficult to compare back to back. But the fact that every e-hybrid I've tried, including the base model, the Michelin UK car, is absolutely brilliant at everything, well, hats off to Porsche on what they've done there. And perhaps I was hoping that this would be even better and more, let's say, Porsche, more sports car. And although it's not bad, I don't think it's any better. And that's really confused and disappointed me in a way. We're in sport. I bet you can't hear that V8. Yeah, its capabilities are incredible. It's just a shame I don't feel like I'm more involved in that. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully see you at another one very, very soon. Cheers.